We'd like to thank Montecito Bank and Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. I'm Patty Teal, here with Christina Perkins, who's the head investigator for the DA's office, County of Santa Barbara. And we're so excited because we love it when we have guests that tell their story. Hopefully it's a near scam and not a scam that they experienced. But we have a wonderful guest here today. Would you like to introduce her, Christina?
Yes, thank you, Patty. Today we have a guest, Ashley. Ashley is here to share her story of almost falling for the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department warrant scam. I know we've talked a lot about this scam on the show, and we have Ashley here to really dive deep into the experience that she had and to tell the listeners just how complicated and in-depth these scammers can be. So Ashley, tell us, just walk us through what you were doing when you received the phone call.
Hi, yes. So I work in medicine and my husband is in the government. So I'm used to calls for needing to do fingerprints or government verification checks. I've worked in the county jail as a nurse in a previous life. And so I was driving my kids to school and I missed a call, and it was from a Santa Barbara County telephone number. Same number you guys called me from, actually. Gave me a little.
We'll cover that later because that's an important part of this.
It is. And so I noticed a voicemail, and once I dropped my children off and I was driving to my first patient, I listened to the voicemail and it said it was Sergeant Chris Corbin calling from the county's department on a vital matter regarding the courts that needed to be figured out today, and if I could please call him at his earliest convenience. Very cordial sounding, very government official sounding, nothing, like I said, I'm not used to. So I got to work. I was starting to set up my, station, called back, got a voicemail, left a voicemail just saying, okay, I guess we're playing phone tag. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. I let my patient know that I might be receiving a call from the sheriff or government, and they probably just needed a background check on my husband or some kind of verification. And it would probably take no longer than 15 minutes so that I could be able to step out of the room. So the day proceeded, and it must have been a couple hours later, that same telephone number from the county called. So I answered, and he again addressed himself as Sergeant Chris Corbin. And I said, great, thank you for connecting back with me. Sorry for the missed call. What is this pertaining to? And he said, unfortunately, you have a couple charges against you. And I am a law-abiding citizen. Like I said, I've worked in the jail system, not been in it. And so I was obviously a little bit flabbergasted. He said, several months ago, we sent a FedEx summons to your house, which you signed for, saying that I was to be an expert witness on a high-profile murder case. And I've grown up in Santa Barbara. I'm born and raised, so I have my foot in many doors. I've had high-profile clients. I've had, soccer mom moments. My husband works in the government. So I'm sure at some point in my life, my dad is a doctor, so he could have been an expert witness. So it wasn't super off my realm. But I didn't remember signing any summons, and I don't know how that works. So I told him that I didn't remember signing anything, and I asked him for the specific information. He said that I signed it on, I'm not remembering the exact date, but say July 23rd at 3:30, which I told him I would have been picking up my children from school at that time. There's no possible way I could have signed it. He said, well, someone signed for you. So now you have two charges against you, one for contempt of court and one for sort of withstanding evidence or holding, I forget the exact terminology.
Holding, probably, yeah.
Withholding evidence. So obviously I was terrified. I would never want to do that personally. obviously want justice to proceed as it should. And I asked immediately what I could do to remedy the situation. And he said, well, you're going to have to try to figure this out today. This has caused this great case to be a mistrial. You need to go in and do a signature verification at the sheriff's department to show that you did not, in fact, sign this summons that you received. And they'll fingerprint you, you'll do a signature, they'll verify it, and then you can kind of go on your merry way. Well, easy enough. I told him I was at work and there's any chance I could wait. He said, absolutely not. So while I was on the phone with him, I managed to get someone to cover my shift, which is frustrating in hindsight. And then he said, and I want to let you know that there is a gag order in effect. And it sounds like something I would understand, but I wanted to clarify. So I said, I'm not sure I understand completely what that is. If you could specify. And he said, oh, well, you're in medicine. It's like a HIPAA compliance. So you just can't, this is a high profile case. You can't tell anybody about this phone call and about these circumstances. I said, I understand. And he said, and because of that, I need to stay on the phone with you to make sure you're not going to tell that. So the situation was getting a little bit more and more grave. As he disclosed, he was having me write down his badge number. I, in due diligence, was looking up his name, his badge number. He was on LinkedIn. He was a sheriff, evidently, in this county for 10 plus years, over a decade. So he seemed to really be who he was saying he was. I stayed on the phone with him. I let my client know I was leaving, that someone was covering my shift, and I got in my car. And that's when he said, also, in addition to verifying your signature, you have to post your own bail, because if you don't do this today, you'll be thrown in jail. And I'm like, jail? I haven't even done anything wrong. This sounded so absurd and preposterous to me, but at the same time, it also seemed plausible that I could have signed for something. I told him my mother maybe could have signed for a FedEx package, my husband. These are things that kind of happen daily, or at least to people on a norm. So I asked him what the charges were, and he told me each charge accrued a $2,500 fee for a total of $5,000. So I needed to go to my bank and get out cash and then post bail. In my head, I was thinking I was going to some, sounds funny saying it out loud, but sort of like in the movies where you go to a bail bondsman and you give them the money and it's secure and then you get the money back. So I thought, okay, well, that's also fine. I went to my bank. I withdrew $5,000. And then he asked me my location, and I said I was in Montecito, and he said the nearest location was this certain address. And so at this point, I've been on the phone for over an hour now. I was just very uneasy, feeling like I was going to get pulled over and thrown in jail for something I had no idea was my fault. And I would never want that to happen. And so I asked him, I said, I'm not trying to be combative. I'm really not. This is so far-fetched. If you could please pass me to a senior, you're someone in charge, someone over you. I would love to speak to somebody else. He said, of course, my superior would be happy to address your concerns. So he patched me over again on a government line that looked like it was from Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. This second man, who I don't remember his name, was not as, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. He was not very nice. He was a little short with me. He's like, you've been nice so far, but you're really standing in our way of justice here. It seems like you're starting to get combative. And I assured him I was not, that it just seemed so far-fetched that this would happen to me. And then this next part was just horrifying. And then someone screamed like they were being murdered. It was loud and gruesome, and the line went dead, and I had no idea what had just happened. this honorable judge, and he named her name, will give you a Zoom call and then reinstate if you would like to be an expert witness on this case, and we will proceed with the case. Now, lucky for me that I said I was born and raised here, and this judge happens to be my aunt. And I said, someone told me I am in contempt of court for not coming to your courtroom as an expert witness. And she said, hang up the phone immediately. This is a scam. And I felt viscerally wronged. I'd like just violated.
Yeah.
And that is luckily how it ended.
Yeah. No, that is a, first of all, I'm sorry you went through that. I can tell even now, right? Retelling it. First of all, I'm so glad that you didn't give them any money, right? That's the success story right now. But I'm really just impressed too with at each point of the way, you really pushed back a little bit and you questioned what was going on. And I think that even if you didn't happen to be related to the judge that he ended up saying at the end, I'm pretty confident at some point you would have hung up and figured out this was a scam. But it's scary.
They really were. They were, good cop, bad cop, if you will. One was super nice and reassuring me I was doing everything right, and the other was pushing back at me and forcing me my will a little bit. But yeah, it goes to show that sort of, I'm educated, I have multiple degrees, feel like I have good street smarts, and I think at some point, yeah, we all have a weakness that it's easily preyed upon.
Right.
Whether
Absolutely, yeah.
a prior run-in with something, whether that's just something you've seen on TV that makes you uneasy that they can prey on, like that is, you just have to, I really do believe you have to go with your gut. And also, I wasn't able to get off the phone. I would have called my husband. I would have called, a bunch of people. Luckily for our technology, we can look up stuff while on the phone. We have texting at our fingertips, even though I was in this sort of holding pattern with them. I texted another friend who works in the DA's office. And like I said, I just, happen to know people. And he was like, first of all, he said, we would never ask you for money. You'd just be in jail.
Okay.
So that was good. I felt reassured again, but having resources, if that ever happens, I think for other people. And now that I've obviously had this happen to me, I've told a number of my friends and colleagues, and the more people you tell, it gets the word out. But also the more people you tell, you find that they have a similar story.
Yes.
Whether it was giving money or whether it was not in my case, but there's scams in just all arenas right now.
There are. I was going to ask you what you thought that screaming was about. Do you think they were running a different scam in the same room, like the kidnapping scam, where they said, "We have your child," and had them scream? I'm just curious, like what it could have been.
I told my husband, and we are big podcast listeners of various mediums, and we had just listened to some podcasts. I think it was through NPR, and they were talking about this. I believe it's the cold calling, where they cold call you and it's annoying, and so you kind of hang up or you end up listening either way. But apparently there was a man, and he was, I think, from Ethiopia, but he was educated, well-educated, degree, all that. He saw a job, I think it was like maybe Malaysia, and accepted this job. They fly them over there, put them up in these really nice hotels. Everything seems like they're getting the job of their life. And then they ended up shipping them across the sea and enslaving them.
Oh gosh.
Do these cold calls and don't get a certain quota, they will torture them. And this man, after 3 years, escaped, and he was telling his story. And honestly, to me, that's what this sounded like. It sounded like he said correctly. He, said a maiden name versus a married name. He almost got me to falter. And so he was being punished. And I don't know, this is hearsay.
Well, yeah, but you just wonder, yes.
And that's,
Plausible. Mm-hmm.
I had just listened to that. And so I think it was in the back of my head thinking, oh gosh, did I just, I almost would just give them the money to not let these
Oh,
people.
right,
But
right.
that's not
Oh,
scary.
Yeah,
yeah.
don't beat yourself up about it, please, right? You've already you're done,
Yeah.
don't have guilt about calling a scam.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
If you're feeling unsure, like I did, ask questions. I said, is there any other locations? And he said, let me look it up. And then he said, oh, I forgot. He said, is Ventura close? And
Oh,
again, you would know if you've worked here for 10 years, even if you don't know how to pronounce it, if you pronounce it right, that
right.
you're 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't
So,
say Los Angeles or
yeah.
Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're ever, to the listeners, like unsure if you're being scammed, just ask them questions that
A
get
good
them
idea.
type
Mm-hmm.
of information. Because ultimately they're probably calling overseas and have no idea what these places are.
Yeah. And they
Right.
won't know the answers, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
a good tip.
my big takeaway too, and I know this is hard, to come across, from law enforcement, but like your friend said, right, we would just come arrest you, number one. We're not going to ask for money. But hearing your story, one of the things that concerned me was how polite you were trying to be. And you knew something was wrong. You felt it, but you didn't want to offend the law enforcement officer. So I encourage you, and can encourage anyone, like, it is not offensive. We do not take personal offense. In fact, it's okay to push back. If you have a question, especially if you're safe on the phone, you're on the phone. Say, I'm not feeling comfortable with this call. I'm going to hang up and call the public line back. And that's okay to do. And I encourage anyone to do that, because what you did was what we're all trained to do, myself included. And then, we're trained to be polite. And then you add being female as well. We're even more conditioned to be polite. And so I really encourage everyone listening, if you feel like your safety is in jeopardy or something like this, you're just not feeling comfortable, it's okay to push back to law enforcement officers. If you're face to face and they're giving you a legal direction, please do what they say. But in this situation, right? In this situation, it's okay to ask those questions. Don't feel like you're being rude or there's an authority that you need to respect at all.
Yeah.
And then the last thing too, what was it? There was another thing. Hold on. This has to be edited
You
out.
mentioned that they spoofed the district
Oh,
attorney's phone.
that's what it
Yes.
was. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Is the important part I wanted to go back to was, this is the warrant scam, including the spoofing of the phone number. So when I spoke to you before, you had shared that when we called back to get your statement, it made you nervous again because it was the same phone number. It appeared to be the same phone number because they had spoofed the county phone number. So
Yeah, so I came into the district attorney and I reported the crime and then I reported it online and you all told me you'd be calling me back. Immediately when that number came on, my heart started beating faster, my breath was short,
right.
and I there was absolutely no way that I was answering that phone call, which is why I went to voicemail. I got your lovely voicemail. I called you back. But I mean, especially my generation, like we used to memorize telephone numbers. I still know my telephone number from growing up, right? So that's not something to me that can be faked. And obviously now I know that it can be, but that's just sort of news to me. So I guess I learned something new in the process.
Yeah.
Which is great, but you think, oh, they have to be calling from an unknown number or from China or wherever, but not Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. I mean, that's wild. That's just like a very great job.
And does that caller ID actually come up too? That says that it's the sheriff's department or just the number?
I mean, I know many numbers from working in it, and then like even,
right. I just was curious. Yeah.
yeah, I looked it up.
Yeah.
So
It's
now
a generic county line. So I called her back from the district attorney's office, and it's a generic county. So it'll look like everyone calling from the county is calling from that same number.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. Well, gosh, we can't thank you enough for you coming and telling your story, because that's what really reaches people. And unfortunately, that's the only way we're going to help people avoid these terrible scams, is by people sharing what happened to them.
Well, I'm happy to do it because, like I said, I think it doesn't matter your socioeconomic background, it doesn't matter your degrees, it doesn't matter where you live. Like, we are all susceptible to this,
Your
and
age, right? It doesn't
age,
matter how old you
gender,
are.
like
Hmm.
there's nothing, no one is apart from this. And I think the more that we get the word out, the more likely we are to prevent this from happening. So I'm happy to be of service.
Aw.
For real this time.
Yeah, for real. To say, we really appreciate it
Yeah.
very much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
Christina, would you give the real number for our hotline that people
Of
can
course.
call? Okay.
The phone number to call if you have any questions or concerns regarding a possible scam, 805-568-2442.
And Ashley, you did a great job telling your story. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks, ladies.
Okay.
We're good about that.
All right. Take care.